Hey guys, welcome back to another video. This is my financial focus, and in this video I'm going to be talking about EPAM systems, which as we can see today is up about 17%, but over the last week or so it's declined by about 30%, particularly right here on February 25th when it fell from $382 per share down to what it is now, or at a low point of about $210 per share. And over the last 3 months, it's fallen by about 60% from an all-time high of about $700 to what is now $248 per share. And the reason why this is because of the events that are currently happening in Russia and Ukraine. We can see from this article right here that it talks about how EPAM Systems stock recently took an epic dive as a result of the exposure that they have to Russian markets and the heightened uncertainties over the events happening in Ukraine. And we can see right here that they point out that on their balance sheet, EPAM Systems currently has about $230 million of cash and cash equivalents held in banks in Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine, which are the regions that are being most heavily impacted by the events that are currently happening there. So in this video, I'm just going to talk about EPAM Systems stock as well as their overall business and figure out if, based on the recent news and the tumble in their share price, whether or not EPAM Systems presents a good buying opportunity from a value investing perspective. And we can see even from this chart right here of the 5-year chart that their share price where it is now is basically around the same general share price of where it was when the initial lockdown measures were implemented. And all the way back then, in around March or April of 2020, a lot of different stocks tumbled quite a bit. So the fact that all of the growth that EPAM System stock has experienced since then up till now, in around the end of 2021 to the beginning of 2022, has basically been completely erased in just a matter of like a couple of months, and especially recently in this week, in just a matter of one day. It could potentially present a good buying opportunity, but we're going to figure that out by looking at the financial health of the business. So what is EPAM Systems? Well, to sum up, EPAM Systems, they basically provide consulting services, and they also design and develop software, which they then go and sell to different companies and help them optimize their technology platforms to try to make their business operations more efficient. And so their customers vary quite significantly across different industries, from lending institutions and investment banks to airline and travel agencies to software and technology companies, and also all the way to news and sports broadcasting companies. So they have a very well diversified source of revenue in that they have a lot of different customers and a lot of different industries. And we can see right here on page 7 of their annual report, they point out right down here in their global delivery model section some of the risks that are being posed to them as a result of the things happening in Russia and Ukraine. We can see right here, they point out basically that their largest delivery centers are located in Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia. And what this means basically is that EPAM Systems, how their business model works, is they provide technology services to companies in America and other areas of the world, but most of their workers and employees and their business service hubs are located in Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus. And so as a result, they're ending up opening themselves up to quite a bit of risk. We can see they have about 12,389 delivery professionals in Ukraine, 9,000 in Belarus, and their third largest area with their customer base is in Russia, with about 8,900 delivery professionals located in Russia. So they're definitely very high exposed to the events that are happening in Russia and Ukraine and in Europe at the moment. And we can also see on page 29, they point out some of the things that they're trying to do in relation to the events that are happening in Ukraine. We see they point out that they basically are not really able to predict the future impact of the conflict that's happening there on their future business operations, but that they're beginning to accelerate their hiring of new employees outside of these regions. And they're also considering moving a lot of their employees that are in those areas out of those areas to try to mitigate the negative impact that the conflict has on their business operations. And this is something that not just EPAM Systems is having to deal with, but a lot of different businesses and a lot of different segments. We saw different news articles coming out recently about, say, for example, Apple and Microsoft and Google and Meta. They're starting to not really provide their services in Russia, and they're trying to sort of move their business out of that area so that they could try to mitigate the negative impact that that has on their businesses. And so right here we see their first financial statement, which is their balance sheet. Let me zoom in here so we can get a better look at the numbers. We can see that their business has been expanding despite the recent impacts, although this is taking into account everything that happened as of December 31st, 2021. So this is not really, at least on this financial statement, taking into account what the business might look like now as a result of the recent events happening in the beginning of 2022. But we see that as of 2021, their business was expanding pretty substantially. Their cash and cash equivalents increased by about $100 million, and their total current assets increased by about $300 million. And we can see that their total assets, one of their largest line items is goodwill, which could potentially be a good thing or a bad thing, but they do open themselves up to the possibility of future goodwill impairment, which could negatively impact this total asset amount on their balance sheet. And then we also see that their total assets increased from about $738 million to $1 billion from 2020 to 2021. And we can see that their total stockholders' equity, with their largest line items being retained earnings at about $1.8 billion, increased from about $1.9 billion to $2.4 billion in 2021. So their business is definitely expanding, but obviously with the new risk that they're facing with the events happening in Europe, we'll see how that holds up in the future statements that they put out to the public. And so the next financial statement I'm going to look at is the income statement. And we can see right here that their revenues increased from 2020 to 2021 by about 41.3%, which is something that they pointed out in another part of their annual report, which I read over. And we can see it increased from about $2.6 billion to $3.7 billion. So an increase by almost 50%. So that is pretty good. And we can also see that from their income from operations, that the $542 million makes up a larger percentage of their total revenues in 2021 than the $379 million made up of their total revenues in 2020, which means that their revenues are not only increasing, but their expenses are also decreasing as a ratio to the increase in their revenues. And so as a result, their income from operations is increasing more than their revenues are increasing as a percentage of each other. And then on top of that, their net income increased from about $327 million to $481 million, showing an increase of about 47.2% in their bottom line from 2020 to 2021. And we can actually get an even more in-depth look at their revenues on page 35, where they show their revenues broken up by their customer base. And we can see earlier I touched on their different clients, which are made up of their financial services and their travel and airline and technology companies and different things like that. And we can see that their revenue streams are actually pretty equally diversified across all of their different customer segments. We can see their largest one is their financial services customer segment, which makes up 22.6% of their total revenues. But across all of their different customer segments, we see it's pretty even, around 19%, 17%, 17%, 10%, 11%. So EPAM Systems, they definitely are doing a really good job in diversifying their revenue streams. And if I scroll down here, we can also see their revenue by geography, by customer location. We can see that more than 50%, almost 60% of their revenues based on their customer segments comes from America. 33% of them come from Europe and the Middle East, and then 4.5% of them come from Russia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Ukraine, and Georgia. So I think that the risk that's happening as a result of the events happening in Russia and Ukraine, it obviously opens them up to exposure as a result of their relationship with the banks in Russia, as well as with the fact that most of their employees are in Russia and Ukraine. But in relation to their customer segment, we see that most of their customers are not actually in Russia and Ukraine. Most of their customers are coming from the United States as well as other areas of Europe. So that's definitely good to see as a result of the recent events that are happening. And so the next financial statement that I'm going to look at, the final one I'm going to look at before doing a discounted cash flow analysis, is their cash flow statement. And we can see that their cash flows from operating activities increased from about $544 million to $572 million in 2021. They invested primarily in acquiring other businesses in 2021, with net cash used in investing activities coming out to be $368 million. And then net cash used in financing activities came out to be $59 million. So pretty good. And we can also see that their cash and cash equivalents at the end of the period increased from $1.3 billion to $1.4 billion, an increase of about $125 million after their different cash flows from the different segments of their business was taken into account. And we can see lastly that I did a discounted cash flow analysis to try to figure out if EPAM Systems at the current share price presents a strong buying opportunity. And we can see from this discounted cash flow model with these growth rates that I pulled from Yahoo Finance, as well as some of these financial metrics from their balance sheet that I pulled here, we can see that the intrinsic value per share based on these growth rates of 24% for the next 5 years and 12% for the next 6 to 10 years after that, it basically comes out to be about $302 per share, with a 30% margin of safety of $211 per share and a 50% margin of safety of $151 per share. And so relative to the current share price, that would mean that EPAM Systems currently could potentially present a good buying opportunity because they're trading below intrinsic value per share. But that is, of course, assuming that their business will continue to be able to grow at a growth rate of about 25% per year for the next 5 years, compounded annually. And based on the different events that are recently popping up in Europe, we're not sure if that could be the case, but I definitely think that a lot of money potentially was made this week on EPAM Systems if there was anybody who was shorting this stock or using some sort of options trading strategy that profited off of the volatility from this stock movement. I was not one of those people, unfortunately, but had I had read their annual report before actually seeing this stock price decline, I might have been able to see this coming, but I unfortunately was not reading their annual report before this happened. But let me know in the comments section down below if anybody was able to capitalize on the share price decline in EPAM Systems, or if anyone is planning on buying up shares of EPAM Systems, or if EPAM Systems currently presents a good buying opportunity. Let me know in the comments down below. Leave a like on the video if it provided any value, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see everyone in the next video.